So unlike Josh, who looks very dapper, I've decided to dress down a little bit. I call this look startup chic. And I don't know if you noticed, but I've got a little TC heart on this sweatshirt, which is for sale out front. And if you think that I'm just standing up here hawking t-shirts, that's wrong, because this is a sweatshirt, all right? So go ahead and go buy one of those, but not right now, because we've got an amazing panel coming up. Please welcome our next guest, Jason Robins from DraftKings, and our moderator, Fitz Tepper.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
You excited to talk about sports in a room full of nerds, including myself?
You know, as I've said many times, I'm a nerd, so I'm at home here.
We all are. So let's start with, who here has played on DraftKings before? So DraftKings is a daily fantasy sports app. What is daily fantasy sports?
So daily fantasy sports is a segment of the overall fantasy sports games where basically instead of playing for an entire season or a subset of that, you play for a day, or in case of football, a weekend. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as what typical fantasy sports fans are accustomed to. You pick a team of players as though you're the general manager. Those players get fantasy points when they perform in the games. And then you play against people, and whoever scores the most fantasy points wins.
And it lasts a day, then it's over. You win or lose money.
It lasts a day, and it's over. And
then
you can play again if you want, or you never have to.
Why do people like that more, only playing
Well,
for
I
a
think
day?
that it kind of brings the best of what traditional season-long fantasy sports provided, and also eliminates some of the things that people don't like about it. So everyone loves the draft and the picking of the players process. You get to do that every day, or as often as you want. People love the scoring and playing against their friends. You get to do that. What sometimes people who, including me, have played season-long fantasy complain about is you get an injury, or your team just isn't very good and you're out of it, or on some of the daily sports especially, where
it's more engaging.
Intense. It's more engaging because you don't have the baggage of carrying players that maybe weren't, you thought they were good when you drafted them and then they got injured. Also, for some of the daily sports, it's very important to have the flexibility. So if you don't want to play literally every single day, you can't play season-long fantasy basketball, hockey, or baseball. DraftKings, you can play when you want.
So yesterday was the first day of the NFL season. Big day for you guys.
Huge.
And ESPN Fantasy was down all day.
Yes.
So how did people use your product yesterday? How many people? Give me some stats.
So what was most exciting yesterday was we had a big push this year. We've talked a lot over the last several months for moving more towards getting people who like to play with their friends and social play. And that was really the focus that we rallied the whole company around, was driving that. And social play was up 3x year over year, which was really exciting and exceeded what we were hoping for.
Like a ballpark number to give people an idea. Are like millions of people are playing each Sunday?
So in a given Sunday, we generally have millions of people across both free and paid games. It really depends on kind of what's going on. So yesterday, for example, we ran a huge free contest, and we had about 500,000 people enter that contest.
500,000 people?
Yeah.
And what was the prize for it?
That was a $100,000 total. I think the top prize, I want to say, it was like 10K or 15K. And then we ran a $3 game that was it was actually almost 2 million entrants. It ended up going to about 1.5 million.
2 million in the game, 1.5 million in the game.
About 1.5 million entries.
And what did the winner win? How much?
$1 million in that
$1 million.
$3 entry, yeah.
So when I tell people about daily fantasy sports, and I'm sure you hear this more than me, they say, why isn't this gambling? So why isn't this gambling?
Well, there's a distinction in the law between games of skill and games of chance, and anyone who's played fantasy sports probably, I would think, would attest that it's a game of skill. So, it's really just the way that the law distinguishes between games of skill and games of chance.
And if there is some chance in there, I mean, if it rains and a player slips and falls, my team's going to be affected.
Well, there's chance in everything. I mean, if you play a golf tournament, the wind could pick up and the weather could change between when your key opponent tees off in the morning and when you tee off in the afternoon. There's a lot of things that are, in any game of skill, some chance. But overall, is it a game of skill or not is the key question.
I have tried a few times, and I come in last every time. So I guess I kind of attest to it being a game of skill. Let's talk about the company's history and you personally. So 4 years ago, you worked at Vistaprint as a marketing manager, basically. And 4 years later, you're the CEO of a $1 billion company. How? How does that happen?
I've always had a passion for sports, for fantasy sports. I grew up loving games. I was a big chess guy when I was a kid. I used to travel and play in tournaments. And this was kind of the dream for me, was to start something in a field I loved, in technology. I'd worked in the tech industry before, so I had a lot of good friends that were interested in this and interested in starting a company and really had the entrepreneurial spirit. And I'd always wanted to do it. I graduated school, however, right after the bubble burst, so I kind of went the traditional route and worked in corporate America for a little bit.
I wasn't slighting you. I'm saying it's amazing. I mean, in 4 years, that's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you didn't invent daily fantasy sports, but you've become the biggest company in the industry. So like, what was your initial pitch to VCs when you first raised money?
I think it was emphasizing our backgrounds. We came from the tech world, we had analytic backgrounds, and we loved the game. So we felt like that was going to be really where we could differentiate. If you looked at the general market at the time, no one was really kind of putting it all together with tech, product, and analytics, and we felt like we could bring that to the table, and our backgrounds and our histories would allow us to be competitively advantaged in this space, combined with the fact that we just knew the industry as a consumer, and we had an intuitive feel for what we thought people would want.
Was it hard to raise money in the beginning?
Oh, it was very hard. The beginning fundraising was brutal. We ended up raising a small seed round from an investor in Boston, and then it was really hard to raise our A and B. We brought in a new board member, a guy named Woody Levin, who I think is here, who is San Francisco-based, to help try and get contacts on the West Coast, and ended up raising
shout out?
Yeah, it's
he
a shout out
invested
to
for the
Woody.
Disrupt shout out?
He did, and I also, while I'm at it, I have to give 2 more shout outs. I'm sorry. One is to my wife, whose birthday is today, so she let me come to this, which I appreciate. And then secondly is to Jeremy Kudon of Oric, who really over the last 8 months has helped us go from a tech company that didn't know a whole lot about legislative affairs and regulation to really being sophisticated there. And
we're going to get into that, don't worry.
Oh, I'm sure.
We're going to talk all about that. So it was hard to raise money in the beginning. You had a lot of no's?
Yeah, we had probably, I'd say, around 50 to 60 people said no before I got to my first yes. And then for our Series A, probably another 50 said no before I got to yes. When it came to our B round, I think, I mentioned bringing on the new board member. We kind of set it up well. I knew a little more by then. I'd never done this before, so I was just taking like a shots on goal approach in the first couple rounds. I was talking to anybody. One big piece of advice I have for people is target. Your time is the most valuable thing in the world. And what really made the difference in our B round is I pre-qualified investors. I said, is this something that would ever be of interest to you? And a lot of people won't tell you that up front. They'll just take the meeting, and it ends up being a waste of your time, and no one wants to say no. So I pre-qualified people up front, and by the time I did it thinking I was traveling, so I wanted to limit my meetings, but in retrospect, I should have done that on my East Coast fundraising too. And by the time I got out here, I had a really great qualified pipeline. So then from there, it was just spending the time in the right places, and the B round happened very quickly as a result.
And you've raised a lot since then.
Yeah, hard to imagine.
Is that the number?
About
even
600
more,
million.
yeah. Over 600 million.
Yeah.
You have some really impressive investors now. So tell me if I'm wrong, but Major League Baseball as a league, Major League Soccer as a league, the NHL as a league, Carmelo Anthony's firm, who was here recently, and the Patriots, the Kraft Group, all invested.
Kraft Group, Jerry Jones, the Yankees president, many other
Yankees
owners
president.
of NFL and
so like any
MLB.
entrepreneur would like kill to have one of those people invest in their company.
Oh, in our most recent round was Revolution, which Ted Leonsis, who's one of the founding members, owns the Washington Capitals, the Washington Wizards. So we're very fortunate. What's cool for us is that the people in the sports world kind of get it. It's almost easier in a way, like it's part of what's fun, I guess, about having a sports company, but it's also just practically, those are the people that understand what the product is and what it means, and also the people that really can help us get introduced to the right relationships and help us understand how to continue to make the product better.
So like, what does having Major League Baseball on your cap table do to the company? Like, how does it help you guys?
It helps in a number of ways. One, it brings credibility to our brand. Having an endorsement, so to speak, from Major League Baseball and a belief in our brand and our company is huge. Also, though, there's a lot we've done with them on the integration side. We have this really cool feature where if you're in your iOS DraftKings app, you can seamlessly integrate. So what happens is if your player comes up to bat, Siri will announce to you, XYZ player is up to bat. You tap a button, and it takes you right over to Major League Baseball at bat. If you're a subscriber, you watch that player's at bat, and then you can seamlessly link right back to DraftKings and continue following your scores. Stuff like that would not be possible without them as a partner.
When you got that investment from the MLB, that was the first major league to invest in you, right? Were you just like, wow?
I knew at that point that this was going to happen faster than people thought. I thought it would take more time for the sports leagues. I thought we'd have to get bigger before we'd really be of interest to them. And they'd be like, oh, that's something small and cool to follow, but we'll see how it goes. And the fact that Major League Baseball right away took interest and then many other sports leagues followed suit, it showed me they were ready for this and they knew that this was something that could be huge and transformational for their product and their content.
And what benefit do you bring to them, to the leagues, to the teams?
There's a lot of data to show that when people play on DraftKings and play fantasy sports in general, they significantly increase their consumption of content. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of our customers report that they consume more sports content since they started playing on DraftKings. Almost half of our customers say they've started following a new sport that they didn't closely follow before since they've started playing on DraftKings. Those are powerful effects that drive growth for other industries. Part of what I love about fantasy sports and DraftKings is it's this cool industry where, yes, we're disrupting, but we're also lifting these other industries. It's very different when you're coming, you're just trying to take something from someone, than when you're coming, you're actually helping and boosting other industries. And it allows you to create unique partnerships and alliances that otherwise you couldn't create.
So I want to get into the legislative stuff a bit, because so far it seems like it's been pretty smooth sailing, like start a company, raise $500 million profit, but it wasn't really like that. So the series of events that I've kind of come up with in the course of a month or two, the first thing that how this all started is one of your employees won $350,000 on a competitor site. And then the next day or two, the Department of Justice opened an investigation into whether DraftKings was gambling. And then the Nevada Gaming Control Board said it was gambling and banned you in the state. And then 3 weeks later, the New York Attorney General issued you a cease and desist. Were you just holy shit, this is over?
I think definitely it was a tough time and it was a lot coming at once. But we were prepared for it mentally. We were a company that had...
You thought something like that would happen?
I think so. I think that we were certainly required to get a crash course in understanding how to navigate those things. And of course, I think there's things that we've learned that we might have done differently, but mentally we were prepared. I remember, so you talked about all the before stuff, and I remember the earliest days when we couldn't raise capital and we were running out of money and it felt like it was going to be the end then. And then I remember this amazing run where it seemed like every major sports league, every team owner, everyone wanted to invest in DraftKings, and capital was endless and the growth was off the charts. This was before.
Before that.
So as we were getting into the start of the NFL season, I remember I stood up in front of the company and I said, the numbers are skyrocketing. We were up over 10x in user growth year over year. Everything was just through the roof. It seemed like it was just like we were a darling, really. It was just awesome to run everything, investing, growth, media, it was all good. And I remember feeling hey, just 2.5 years ago, I wasn't sure we were going to be able to raise our A round to get to the next level. That was the most stressful I've ever felt. So I remember I talked to the company, this is around September of last year, before any of the stuff you're describing happened. And I said, this feels great right now, we should celebrate, we should enjoy it. But building a big company is about ups and downs. You can't get too high, you can't get too low. It's not going to always be this way, so let's remember that. And when we have a low moment, let's remember what this felt like, because it can go to either extreme. And lo and behold, a month and a half later, everything you described happened. And I remember just thinking back to that and thinking back to the early days when it was so hard to raise funds and thinking, all right, this is another phase that's going to be challenging. And I think we have the right people here and the right mental makeup to get through it, but it's going to be challenging. I'm geared up, team's geared up. Let's go and let's try to address the issues that are out there, and let's try to continue to build what we're building. And no one ever took their eye off the ball. The mission was always central to everything, what we were doing, the passion we felt for it. In some ways, it helped rally the company to feel like, okay, it's us against the world. And I think that actually really helped a lot in terms of pulling everyone together. And we had below average attrition over the last 12 months. The metrics are remarkable for a company that went through such a trying period. And I do think it really rallied everyone together because people are so passionate about the product and so passionate about our mission and what we're doing.
You had some help. you hired lobbyists and probably some world-class, very expensive lawyers. I don't want to see your legal bills.
No, I mentioned earlier Oric, which for anyone who's in a disruptive industry that might be regulated, they did a fantastic job. We had really, I think, an unprecedented run in state legislatures over the last 6 or 7 months. We passed bills in 8 states. That brings a total up to 10. it was amazing to see the response from the legislative community and listening to their constituents who were sending emails. In New York alone, there were over 100,000 emails, phone calls, social media posts made to key legislative officials.
100,000.
More. And that alone is just one state. If you look at it across the country, it was close to 1 million plus that were sent out. And I think that really lets legislators know. I remember when I was in New York, a legislator walked up to me and they were considering some really tough issues in that legislative session. They were dealing with the heroin epidemic, like other really tough things. And he said to me, I never have gotten, in my entire 25 years in the legislature, I have never gotten as much outreach in support of something as I did for this. And that really meant a ton to me, that people cared enough, that they wanted this enough. And that's the difference, really, between why we've been successful and not. It had nothing to do with anything other than a great team helping navigate all that stuff, and then the support of our customers and everyone who wants to see us be successful.
During that time when things were really bad, I think like a lot of the media was having a field day, and there were rumors of you merging with FanDuel, which is like your biggest competitor for anyone that doesn't know. Were there talks between you and FanDuel?
There's always been talks. I mean, I've gone on record many times in the last 2 years saying that I think it's an interesting discussion, and mergers are always tough, right? It has to come together in the right way, and it has to be something that you think is better than just an idea. It can actually be executed on. So there's always talks. Where that actually leads and when, we'll see. But we've been talking on and off for really the last year and a half or so.
Is there a reason it didn't happen when you were talking last?
I think just the devil's in the details. It's very complicated to put two companies together, let alone two that are in an industry that's so rapidly changing. And, I think that when the time is right, there's potential for something like that, but it has to be right. And I think everyone sort of knows, right now is a really important time of year for us. So I think it's been important for us to focus on the NFL season and making sure we're geared up for that. And we'll see if those talks ever go anywhere.
What would the benefits be to a merger?
I mean, immediately we would have a company that has more liquidity in our marketplace, which is the most important value to the customer. I think that's key. I also think the fact that there's just a lot of synergies on the legislative side, the legal side. I mean, everything you just talked about, we were double paying for the most part. So, there's a lot of synergies there, I think.
And in terms of you got the MLB to invest in you and they didn't, was there like a rush to, is there a rush to kind of stake your claim in the sports world between you and them?
I think maybe there's some of that, but I also think that for us, at least, it's more a focus on we're creating a new industry. We're trying to grow that industry. We're also trying to expand into tangent markets. And it's very important to have relationships with the leagues. They control the content. If they don't have a good relationship with us, then it really limits the things that we can do long-term with the content. For example, we just launched this app, DK Live, that I know we'll be showing later on the Facebook Live feed. And a lot of people ask me, well, how can you get video highlights and stuff like that in there? And we don't have that today, but eventually, if we want to be able to get those sorts of things in there, it's very important that we have close relationships with the people who own the IP, who own the content.
So let's talk about DK Live, the app that you're launching today, basically. A lot of people are saying it's like a stab at ESPN, and you're trying to become like a media company. Are you?
I don't think anyone does anything as a stab at ESPN. I love ESPN.
A stab's the wrong word, but I mean.
But I mean, listen, I think that for us, we just think of things less about who the competition might be and more about what does our customer want and what do we need to provide and what's a natural expansion point for us. And we looked at it and we said there are a lot of scoring apps out there. ESPN is one of them. But there's none that really cater specifically to the sports fan, the way the fantasy sports fan, the way that the Red Zone channel caters to that. The Red Zone channel is this channel on NFL Network, or part of NFL Network, that shows just highlights of key plays, and it's just so clearly designed for a fantasy audience. And we said there's a lot of scoring apps out there, and they're useful if anyone is following scores, but no one's really drilled in and said, how do we create an experience for the fantasy fan that's every bit as good as the Red Zone channel, but digitally and in this scoring app? And that was the goal of it. And I think no one's really done that, not ESPN, not anybody. So it's not about trying to compete with them so much as trying to provide something to our customers that we think we're well suited and well positioned to provide and fits with our overall brand and value proposition.
But if you could create an app and custom content for people that aren't so much into fantasy, but they're huge sports fans, Is that a plus?
Eventually, yes, but right now that's not the focus. The focus of that app is really for fantasy fans, and the good news is that we have about 7 million customers. There's about 57 million people in North America alone who play fantasy sports, so it's a huge market for us to address and much bigger than our current customer base. Obviously, our current customers are a natural point to promote to, but for us, it's more about trying to reach that audience of 57 million playing fantasy, and then we'll see once we tap that if it makes sense to expand into broader, more general sports consumption. But right now, the focus with that app is on the fantasy audience and building something that if you're a fantasy fan, you say there is no other app out there that's built for me the way this is.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Congratulations on the growth and getting through all those legislative issues, and we're excited to see where you go next.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.